Michael Scheuer served as chief of the Osama bin Laden unit until 1999. He was a senior within the CIA until 2004. First, I asked for his reaction to the declassification of the report on CIA interrogation practices. Will it make interrogations more difficult in the future?
It'll make it more difficult in the sense that who's going to want to take a chance on some new president changing his mind about what the old president did, ma'am. I think what we're seeing here in the United States is a complete politicalization of foreign policy and defense policy. And quite frankly, I think what it's going to do is to make sure that no one at CIA or any of the other intelligence agencies does anything but the letter of what they're supposed to do. No risk, no ideas that are kind of outside the box. I think what we're seeing is the result of a political game that's being played here.
You make it sound rather cuddly when you put it like that, as though you're talking about eliminating dynamism in people's jobs. But we're talking here about mock executions and people allegedly being threatened with having their children murdered. So wouldn't it be a good thing?
Were they?
The allegations that this is what was used to interrogate the terror suspects, isn't it a good thing if they stick to the letter of the law?
That was the letter of the law. Whatever was done with the approval of the legal community in the United States, ma'am. None of this stuff was done without rigorous and continual legal approvals.
So it came from the very top?
Of course it did. Of course it did. I think people in Europe, but also most Americans, assume somehow the CIA is a rogue organization. And truth to be told, we're much more rigorously examined and reviewed than probably any other agency in the United States government.
Okay. You said earlier that this was the politicization of interrogation methods, but surely declassifying some of this report and reopening the cases of possible misconduct will restore the faith in American values, and that's important too, isn't it, when you're talking about what is essentially a war of winning hearts and minds?
We're never going to win hearts and minds in this war because we in the United States and you in Britain, at least in our leadership cadre, continue to say we're being attacked because we have freedoms and liberties and women in the workplace and beer after work. And, of course, none of that is true. So we're not in the hearts and minds at all.
Why are we being attacked?
We're being attacked because of our foreign policy, ma'am, because of our unquestioning blind support for Israel, because of our presence on the Arabian Peninsula, because of our invasion of Iraq, because of probably most of all our hypocritical and really dastardly support for Arab tyrannies over the last 50 years. That's why we're being attacked. And so one of the reasons we need or we have used renditions and interrogations and drones is because they hate us for what we do, ma'am. If we were being attacked because people didn't like McDonald's or women in the workplace, we wouldn't have any problem at all.
It must have been very difficult for you holding that opinion and being in charge of the bin Laden unit and the work that you had to do.
Well, it made me very eager to do my job, ma'am, because I thought if we didn't kill them, they'd eventually defeat us, because we were never going to be able as a political elite in the United States to stand up and tell the American people the truth.
You're basically saying that the war on terror is unwinnable.
It's unwinnable unless we realize what the enemy is up to, ma'am. You go back to the Chinese historians and philosophers, and they say if you don't know the enemy, he'll always defeat you, and that's what we have at the moment. If you go through the corpus of the rhetoric of Osama bin Laden since 1999, you will not see any references to hating liberty, hating freedom, hating our way of life. What you'll see is a determined hatred to defeat what we're doing in the Muslim world.
In that case, how important are these techniques in winning the war on terror and preventing more attacks?
What we've seen by the United States and its allies is a complete turning on its head of the way wars are waged. Rendition, interrogation, special forces, the use of drones in Pakistan, all of those are nice to have tools in a war effort, but they're not the war effort itself. But unfortunately, because our leaders will not use our conventional militaries the way they're supposed to be used, we rely on these things to defend our people, and they're not enough to do that. It's very much a losing battle. But it's what we have on our plate to use, and that's what we need to use for the time being.
What do you make of Obama's move then to put the FBI in charge of counterterrorism investigations instead of the CIA?
You may as well put a Band-Aid on a sucking chest wound, ma'am. My own view, though, is no one should be interrogating these folks. If we really understood why they were fighting us, they should be made prisoners of war and treated just as we treated the Japanese and the Germans during World War II. And I would just get this whole mess of interrogation off of everybody's plate and get down to the business of telling, in my own case, the American people why we're at war.
How did you manage to keep your job for so long with the perspective that you've got under the Bush administration?
Well, not to be boastful, ma'am, but I was very good at what I did, and I had extraordinary officers who worked for me.
Did you ever use these kinds of interrogation techniques?
Personally or as a manager?
Either.
I certainly authorized their use and approved of them.
And how do you sleep at night thinking about that?
They were enemies of the United States, ma'am.
But you don't seem to agree with
they
it.
They were miscategorized as criminals, and we were ordered by the president and his people to go after them in the way we did. But my job at the end of the day is still protecting Americans.
So are you proud of it?
I'm proud of what we stopped. Yes, ma'am, of course. Do I think it's sufficient? The answer to that is no.
Does it give you cause for concern that cases are going to be reopened, the alleged CIA mistreatment of terror suspects?
Not if it's done publicly, on television, and under oath. So the intelligence community and the people who conducted the defense of the United States can tell the American people about the way their leaders behaved, the cringing, cowardly approach to protecting Americans. I think it would be a very, very good thing.
Michael Scheuer, formerly of the